Welcome to True Betrayal Stories. We can't wait to hear where you're tuning in from, so drop your location in the comments below. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and share your thoughts. We love connecting with you and hearing what resonates. What does it feel like when the ground beneath your feet crumbles? Not from an earthquake, but from the quiet, calculated betrayal of the one person you trusted most. At 5:03 a.m., a faint sliver of dawn pierced the heavy fog blanketing a sleepy street in Asheville, North Carolina, casting long shadows on the uneven pavement. Ethan Marwood, now 36, dragged his exhausted frame up the creaking steps of his small, weathered duplex, the air sharp with the scent of rain-soaked pine and the distant hum of early morning delivery trucks. His hands, calloused from years of gripping heavy machinery, still tingled from the 14-hour shift at Blue Ridge Warehousing, where he'd been hauling crates since he was 29 to fund his wife Lila's dream of becoming a therapist. The ache in his shoulders was a familiar companion, a testament to the sacrifices he'd made for a future he believed they were building together, a future that, until a few hours ago, had seemed just within reach. Ethan, the son of a carpenter who passed when he was 21, had always been the steady one, the rock for his grieving mother and younger brother Sam. He'd shelved his own dreams of studying engineering to take care of them, working odd jobs until he landed at the warehouse. When he met Leila Harper at 31, she was a barista at a cozy downtown cafe, her laugh as warm as the espresso she served, her eyes bright with a dream to heal others. Their love ignited like a wildfire, sweeping them into marriage within 18 months. "You're my safe harbor," she'd whispered on the night she was accepted into UNC Asheville's counseling program, her voice trembling with hope. "We'll build something beautiful together." For Ethan, that meant night shifts, missed dinners, and a quiet pride in her late-night study sessions. The glow of her laptop, a beacon of their shared tomorrow. They dreamed of a family, a little girl with Lila's eyes, maybe a boy with Ethan's stubborn streak. But lately the air between them had shifted, heavy with unspoken tension. Lila's laughter would fade when Ethan entered the room, her phone calls hushed and hurried, a new necklace glinting at her throat with no story to explain it. That morning, as he stood in their cramped bedroom, the scent of her lavender shampoo lingering, Ethan's gaze fell on her phone, its screen pulsing with a notification. He hadn't meant to look. Trust had always been their foundation, but the weight of suspicion pressed too hard. The message from Professor Daniel Warwick, her mentor, seared into his vision. "Can't wait for your graduation, my love. Our fresh start begins then." Has he noticed yet? Ethan's breath caught, his heart a hammer against his ribs, as he scrolled through a hidden tapestry of messages, each one a shard of glass, slicing through the life he'd built. In that moment, the warmth of their shared dreams turned to ash, and a cold, unyielding resolve began to take root deep within him. The auditorium at UNC Asheville buzzed with a restless energy, the air thick with the scent of blooming dogwoods drifting through open windows, and the murmur of proud families, clutching bouquets of daisies and roses. Ethan Marwood sat alone in a sea of celebration, the empty chair beside him a bitter reminder of Lila's father, who'd bailed last minute with a flimsy excuse about a work emergency Ethan knew was a lie. 4 rows ahead, Professor Daniel Warwick, 49, stood out like a polished statue, his charcoal suit pristine, his salt and pepper hair catching the light, his easy confidence, the kind that came from a life untouched by the grind of manual labor. Daniel's family was a picture of perfection. His wife, Vivian, poised in a navy dress that spoke of old money, and their 2 teenage sons, oblivious to the storm their father had set in motion. When the dean's voice echoed through the hall, "Leila Harper Marwood," Ethan watched his wife glide across the stage, her cap adorned with a tassel that danced in the light, her smile a radiant mask that hid the truth. The word betrayal burned in his chest, but he clapped, his hands moving on autopilot, his heart a block of ice. At the reception, the clink of champagne flutes and the hum of laughter filled the air, but Ethan's ears caught Lila's voice, sharp and secretive, as she spoke to a classmate near a table of petits fours. "I'm filing next week. Ethan doesn't suspect a thing. Vivian's in on it too. Daniel says they've had an open marriage for years, just waiting for the boys to head to college. The casual dismissal of their vows, the calculated affair, turned Ethan's blood to frost, the taste of bile rising in his throat. He remembered the nights he'd come home with blisters on his hands, the way Lila used to kiss them better, promising they'd make it through. That night, as they drove through Asheville's winding streets, the Blue Ridge Mountains looming like silent witnesses, Lila's voice was unnaturally bright. With school done, maybe we should take a break. Figure things out, she said, her words a careful test. Ethan's grip on the wheel tightened, his knuckles white. Is that Daniel Warwick's idea? The silence that followed was louder than any confession. You know, she said, her tone sharpening like a blade. I know everything, Ethan replied, his voice a low, steady fire. So what's your next move? I'm sorry, Ethan, she snapped, her words dripping with disdain. I need someone who understands my world, someone on my level. The sting of her betrayal was a physical ache, but Ethan only said, so that's how it is, his mind already mapping a path to justice. He thought of his father's old workbench in the garage, the tools still gleaming after all these years, a symbol of the steady hands that had raised him. Ethan had inherited that steadiness, but now it was time to wield it for something new, something sharper. 3 days later, the divorce papers arrived, a cold slap of reality. But Lila's demand for half their savings and 3 years of alimony was a betrayal that cut deeper than Ethan could have imagined. She claimed she needed support to launch her therapy practice, a practice built on the sacrifice of his sweat-soaked nights at the warehouse. Ethan's mind flashed to the early days of their marriage, when they'd sit on their sagging couch, splitting a cheap pizza and dreaming of the future. He'd promised to carry her dreams on his shoulders, but now those dreams were a weapon turned against him. Desperate for clarity, he turned to Marcus Holloway, a gruff attorney recommended by his warehouse buddy Nate, who'd survived a similar heartbreak. Marcus's office was a cluttered nook above a diner on Patton Avenue, the air thick with the scent of frying bacon and the distant clatter of dishes. Marcus himself was a broad-shouldered man of 45, his tie perpetually loosened, his desk a chaotic spread of legal pads and coffee mugs. But his eyes were sharp, cutting through the fog of Ethan's pain. So she's asking for alimony after you funded her degree, and she's already shacked up with this professor? Marcus asked, summing up the affair with a grimace. Yeah, Ethan said, his voice tight, his fingers tracing the edge of a worn photo of him and Lila at their wedding. Her in a simple white dress, him in a rented suit, both of them laughing under a willow tree. She says she needs help to get started. Marcus leaned back, his chair creaking, and tapped his pen against his chin. When did this thing with the professor start? At least 6 months ago, Ethan said, the timeline a bitter pill. She was his student then. That's our angle, Marcus said, scribbling a note with a ferocity that matched Ethan's growing anger. UNC Asheville has strict ethics rules about professor-student relationships. Did you keep records of what you paid for her education? Tuition? Books? Anything? Every receipt, Ethan said, his habit of saving every scrap of paper a lifeline now. I'm a pack rat. That's a gold mine, Marcus said, a predatory glint in his eye. And this Daniel Warwick, what do you know about him? Married, 2 sons. He and Vivian supposedly have an arrangement. Interesting, Marcus muttered, jotting another note. Ethan, we've got a shot here. We can counter her alimony with proof of her affair, which likely breaks university ethics. That's step 1. Will it be enough? Ethan asked, the weight of 4 years of sacrifice pressing down like a physical burden. It's a start, Marcus said, studying him with a knowing look. But I'm guessing you want more than just dodging payments. You want accountability. Ethan met his gaze, the word justice afire in his chest. I want them to feel the cost of what they took from me. Marcus nodded, a slow, approving gesture. I've got a colleague, Harper Quinn, an ex-PI who works as my paralegal. She's a bloodhound when it comes to digging up dirt. Want her on this? Ethan thought of the endless nights at the warehouse, the way the cold metal of the crates bit into his hands, the dreams he'd buried for Lila's future. Yes, he said, his voice steady. Days later, he met Harper, a wiry woman in her late 30s with a buzz cut and a gaze that missed nothing, her leather jacket scuffed from years of chasing truths. 4 years of night shifts, she said after hearing his story, her voice low and empathetic. That's a hell of a sacrifice. It was for us, Ethan said, bitterness seeping into his tone. But she used it to build a future with him. Harper's jaw tightened, her fingers drumming on the table. I stay legal, Ethan, but I play hard. You ready for what we might uncover? And what you'll do with it? Ethan saw the warehouse in his mind's eye. The flickering lights, the endless stacks of crates, the life he'd deferred for a betrayal. I'm ready for consequences, he said. Harper's nod was a silent pact. Let's make them face accountability. Ethan kept grinding at Blue Ridge Warehousing, but his purpose had shifted. Each paycheck a tool in his arsenal, some for legal fees, some for Harper's investigation, the rest for a resilience fund he called his New Dawn. He'd always been good with numbers, a trait inherited from his father, who taught him to balance books for his carpentry business before he passed. Now Ethan applied that same precision to his fight, tracking every expense, every hour, every betrayal. 2 weeks later, Harper slid a thick dossier across Marcus's desk, her findings a grenade with the pin already pulled. This wasn't just an affair, she said, her voice steady but charged with the weight of what she'd uncovered. Lila and Warwick planned this for over a year, using your sacrifice to fund their future. Ethan's hands clenched, the paper crinkling under his grip. Show me. The emails were a cold, calculated betrayal, each word a dagger. Lila wrote, Ethan's pulling doubles to cover this semester's tuition. 1 more year and I'm set with my degree. Warwick replied, perfect. Vivian's new role in Charlotte starts next fall. Our timing's flawless. There's more, Harper said, her tone grim as she slid another document forward. They leased an office for Warwick and Harper counseling, using your joint savings for the deposit. Ethan's rage surged, a hot flood that made his vision blur. Our money, he growled, thinking of the rainy nights he'd worked overtime. The way Lila had once brought him a thermos of soup to the warehouse, her smile a lie even then. Yes, Harper said, then pushed forward a third file. But Warwick's up for department chair, and he's got a book deal in the works. A big one, with a major publisher. Both depend on his spotless reputation. An ethics scandal with a student would burn it all down. They've been careful, Marcus added, his voice measured. Their official relationship started after Lila's grades were submitted, technically dodging ethics violations. So we can't hit him yet, Ethan said, the need for justice a pulsing ache. Not yet, Harper said, a sly grin spreading across her face. But Vivian Warwick is Vivian Ashford Warwick, daughter of Theodore Ashford, a heavyweight in Asheville's real estate scene. The Ashfords bankrolled Warwick's career, and they're obsessed with their pristine image. They'd lose it if he left Vivian for a student. Ethan leaned in, his mind racing. So Warwick's risking more than his job. Far more, Harper said, her eyes gleaming with the thrill of the hunt. One more thing. Lila's been recording you, trying to catch you sounding controlling. She's building a case for harassment if you fight the divorce too hard. Ethan's laugh was bitter, echoing in the small office. We've barely talked in months. What's she got? Nothing solid, Harper said, her grin widening. But it proves she's been plotting her exit while you were breaking your back for her. Ethan felt the sting of her betrayal anew, the memory of Lila's hand in his, promising forever, now a cruel joke. What's our move? Marcus exchanged a look with Harper, a silent agreement passing between them. We can negotiate a fair divorce with this, or we go for consequences. Make them lose what they built on your sacrifice. Ethan saw the warehouse, the endless nights, the trust shattered like glass. Consequences, he said, his voice steel. I want accountability. A call came 3 days later from an unknown number, the ring cutting through the quiet of Ethan's lunch break at the warehouse. Mr. Marwood, I'm Caleb Finch, Warwick's TA, the voice said, shaky but determined. Ethan's grip on his phone tightened. How'd you get my number? Harper Quinn. She said I might have something you need. They met at a dimly lit cafe on Biltmore Avenue, the kind of place where the coffee was strong and the booths offered privacy. Caleb, a lanky 25-year-old with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous habit of tapping his foot, clutched his mug like a lifeline. I've been Warwick's TA for 3 years, he said, his voice low, his eyes scanning the room. He's brilliant, but he's got a pattern. Your wife isn't the first. Tell me, Ethan said, his calm a mask for the storm raging inside. At least 4 other students, Caleb said, his voice cracking. Always the top performers. He mentors them closely, then more. Lila's the first he's planned a future with, though. The others were just flings. Why no ethics investigation? Ethan asked, the words sharp on his tongue. Caleb's laugh was hollow, bitter. Warwick brings in grants, prestige, donors. The university looks the other way. He's careful, nothing official until grades are posted. Why tell me? Ethan pressed, leaning forward. Caleb hesitated, his fingers trembling around his mug. Last year, my cousin, Elise, was in his seminar. He tried his moves on her. When she said no, her grades tanked. She lost her scholarship, had to drop out. 6 months ago, she didn't make it. Ethan's heart sank, the weight of shared betrayal a heavy burden. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice soft. The memory of his own brother's struggles after their father's death flashing through his mind. I've been collecting evidence, Caleb said, his voice steadying with purpose. But without Elise to testify, it's not enough. When Harper reached out, I knew we could help each other. Caleb shared a USB drive filled with screenshots of suggestive emails, records of grade changes, and anonymous student complaints buried by the university. That night, Ethan, Marcus, and Harper gathered in Marcus's office. The diner below, long closed, the air heavy with the scent of stale coffee. They mapped a plan, a chess game with Warwick and Lila as the pawns. It's risky, Marcus warned, his voice low. If we accuse without airtight proof, we could face a defamation suit. We won't accuse directly, Ethan said, his mind sharp with purpose. We'll make Warwick expose himself. Caleb's in. The plan drained Ethan's savings and called in favors from warehouse buddies. Men like Nate, who'd once helped Ethan fix a flat tire in a downpour, and Tommy, a burly forklift driver with a soft spot for underdogs. Meanwhile, Lila's lawyer, Nadia Ellison, a sharp-eyed attorney from a top Asheville firm, pushed for alimony and a cut of Ethan's future earnings, claiming Lila had sacrificed her career for his stability. The audacity of the lie made even the judge raise an eyebrow. Ethan stayed silent, letting Marcus handle the legal sparring while he orchestrated his real move. Carefully curated packets sent to Vivian, Theodore Ashford, UNC Asheville's president, and a local reporter known for exposing academic scandals. Each packet held just enough to spark questions, forcing the recipients to dig deeper, exactly as Ethan intended. The final piece came from Nate's sister, Riley, a 28-year-old tech whiz who'd once hacked her high school's grading system for a prank. You need deleted data recovered from a device, legally admissible? Riley asked, her tone all business as she sipped a Red Bull in Marcus's office. Yes, Ethan said. Can you do it? For a price, Riley said, naming a figure Ethan could cover with his overtime savings. I'll need the device for an hour. Ethan grinned, a rare spark of hope igniting. I can make that happen. 7 weeks into the divorce, Nadia called a meeting, her usual sharpness dulled by an undercurrent of unease. My client's willing to drop the alimony, she said, her voice clipped, in exchange for a lump sum and mutual NDAs. Marcus raised an eyebrow, sensing weakness. What changed? Nadia's smile was tight, her eyes avoiding Ethan's. She wants this resolved quickly. After she left, Marcus turned to Ethan, his tone curious. Something rattled them. Any guesses? Vivian got my packet 4 days ago, Ethan said, his voice steady. Caleb says she confronted Warwick. It got ugly. Screaming. Broken dishes. The works. The other packets had landed too. The university president summoned Warwick for a closed-door meeting, and Theodore Ashford was making calls, his influence a looming threat. Then a surprise. Vivian Ashford Warwick approached Ethan after a shift, her sleek BMW idling in the warehouse parking lot, the leather interior smelling of wealth and perfume. Mr. Marwood, she said, her voice poised but laced with steel. Your packet was illuminating. I've known Daniel's ways for years, but using your money for their practice crosses a line. Why stay with him? Ethan asked, the sting of betrayal a familiar ache in his chest. Family image, the boys, she said, waving a hand dismissively, her diamond ring catching the light. But I'm here because your wife and my husband used your savings for their business. They did, Ethan said, anger flaring. the memory of Lila's late-night study sessions now a bitter lie. Vivian's eyes glinted with a cold resolve. The Ashfords don't tolerate fools. I'm not taking that Charlotte job. I'm staying in Asheville. Their practice? It'll never see a single client. No hospital contracts, no insurance panels, no referrals from our network. Why tell me? Ethan asked, his voice steady but curious. Because you've been wronged like me, she said, handing him a card with her lawyer's name embossed in gold. My lawyer can help recover your education costs, free of charge. As she drove off, Ethan felt his plan for justice tighten, the pieces falling into place like the gears of a machine he'd spent years mastering at the warehouse. The next night, Caleb called, his voice buzzing with adrenaline. Warwick tried wiping emails from the department server after hours. Campus security caught it on camera. Time-stamped, undeniable. The university's legal team's on him like hawks. Ethan thanked him, a rare smile breaking through his exhaustion, then called Riley, who'd recovered deleted recordings from Lila's phone during a staged tech help encounter at a coffee shop. The files don't show you being controlling, Riley said, her voice triumphant. They catch her planning with Warwick. She forgot to stop recording after one of their calls. Can you prep them for court? Ethan asked, his pulse quickening. Locked and loaded, Riley said, her grin audible. Oh, and I found texts proving they used your account for the lease. Clear financial misconduct. Ethan hung up, the warehouse around him silent save for the hum of a distant forklift, his path to accountability clearer than ever. The Buncombe County Courthouse stood like a sentinel under Asheville's overcast sky, its stone facade cold and unyielding as Ethan arrived with Marcus. Harper and Caleb were already there, huddled by a vending machine in the hallway, their whispers cutting through the murmur of the courthouse crowd. News? Ethan asked, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. Warwick's on leave, Caleb said, his eyes bright with a mix of triumph and exhaustion. Anonymous tip about ethics breaches. Someone sent the president a detailed report. Lila's playing the victim card, Harper added, her tone dripping with disdain. Claims Warwick manipulated her, that she didn't know about the other students. And Vivian? Ethan asked, his mind flashing to her icy resolve in the parking lot. Filed for divorce, Harper said, a grim smile tugging at her lips. Ashford lawyers froze Warwick's assets faster than you can say prenup. And inside the courtroom, Ethan's gaze swept the room. A local reporter scribbled in the back row. A university lawyer sat stiffly near the front. And Theodore Ashford himself loomed in the gallery, his presence a quiet storm. Lila shuffled in, her face pale, her usual confidence replaced by a jittery unease. Warwick was conspicuously absent. Judge Eleanor Grayson called the court to order at 9:15 a.m., her sharp eyes scanning the room. Developments in the Marwood divorce, she asked, her tone clipped. Nadia stood, her posture rigid. My client drops alimony, seeks a basic asset split, excluding education costs. The judge's brow furrowed, sensing the shift. A significant pivot. Mr. Holloway? Marcus rose, his voice calm but commanding. We reject the split. Lila committed financial misconduct, using joint funds for a business with Daniel Warwick without Ethan's consent. Nadia bristled, her voice sharp. That's speculation. We have proof, Marcus cut in, presenting lease transfers for Warwick and Harper Counseling, signed 3 months before the divorce filing, the dates stark on the page. Lila blanched, her hands trembling as she clutched the table. Further, Marcus continued, her affair with Warwick began during her studies, breaching university ethics. Objection, Nadia snapped. Irrelevant to the financials. Overruled, Judge Grayson said, her gaze piercing. Relationships can impact financial claims, but I'll need evidence, Mr. Holloway. Gladly, Marcus said, calling Caleb to the stand. Lila gripped Nadia's arm, her knuckles white, as Caleb detailed Warwick's pattern of targeting students, including Lila, with late-night mentorship sessions that crossed every line. When Marcus played Lila's recordings, her voice scheming with Warwick to exploit Ethan's sacrifice, her laughter cold and calculated as they planned their practice, the courtroom fell silent, the weight of her betrayal hanging heavy in the air. Lila's head dropped, her shoulders shaking. Vivian's testimony sealed the deal, her voice steady as she described finding proof of Daniel's affairs and his year-long plan with Lila, started when she was his research assistant. They began plotting their practice 18 months ago, Vivian said, her tone icy. using Ethan's money to fund it. By the time Vivian stepped down, the judge's face was a mask of disapproval. Marcus requested full repayment of Ethan's education contributions and damages for the misused funds, his voice unwavering. Nadia, after a frantic whisper with Lila, offered no rebuttal. "We request a recess," she stammered, her confidence shattered. "1 hour," Judge Grayson said, her tone sharp as a blade. "Use it wisely." The courthouse halls buzzed with whispers as attorneys and onlookers spilled out, their voices a low hum against the patter of rain on the windows. Ethan stood by a tall window, watching droplets streak down the glass, the gray sky mirroring the storm inside him. He thought of his brother, Sam, now 29 and working as a mechanic in Raleigh, how he'd called last week to check in. "You don't deserve this, man," Sam had said, his voice thick with anger on Ethan's behalf. "But you're tougher than anyone I know. You'll come out stronger." The memory bolstered Ethan, a reminder of the resilience that ran in his blood. Theodore Ashford approached, his tailored suit and silver hair a stark contrast to Ethan's worn jeans and flannel. "You're a calculated man, Mr. Marwood," Theodore said, his voice low, commanding. "You waited for the right moment to strike." "Years at the warehouse teach you timing," Ethan replied, shaking his hand, the calluses on his palm a testament to his grit. "You refused Vivian's legal help," Theodore noted, his eyes narrowing with respect. "This is my fight," Ethan said, his voice firm. Theodore nodded, a rare smile breaking through. "Warwick's finished at UNC Asheville. Book deal's dead. Your wife's name is toxic now. Ethics matter in this town." Before Ethan could respond, Harper pulled him aside, her eyes alight with urgency. "Warwick's here and he's unraveling. Blaming Lila for the leak. Says she ruined his life." Through a conference room window, Ethan saw Warwick gesturing wildly, his face red. Lila slumped in a chair, Nadia stone-faced as she tried to mediate. "He's screaming that she cost him everything," Harper said, her voice low. The door flew open, and Warwick stormed out, his eyes locking on Ethan. "You!" he roared, lunging forward, his tie askew. A bailiff intercepted, pinning Warwick's arms as he shouted, "You destroyed my career, my marriage." "You did that yourself," Ethan said, his voice calm, a rock in the storm. "I just held up the mirror." Warwick was hauled out, his curses echoing down the hall, and Theodore watched with a satisfied nod, his presence a silent endorsement of Ethan's justice. When court resumed, Lila sat alone. Nadia had been called away by her firm, leaving her client to fend for herself. "Your Honor," Lila croaked, her voice breaking, "I drop all claims. I'll sign anything." "No counsel?" Judge Grayson asked, her tone sharp but not unkind. "No," Lila said, her eyes downcast. Marcus presented a settlement, full repayment of education costs, return of the stolen funds, and an NDA barring Lila from leveraging their marriage professionally. "These terms are tough but fair," the judge said, her gaze lingering on Lila. "Ms. Harper, you agree?" "Yes," Lila mumbled, her voice barely audible. "Your conduct here is troubling," Judge Grayson added, her tone heavy with disapproval. "This court doesn't tolerate deceit in divorce cases." As the gavel fell, Ethan watched Lila, the woman who'd once promised him the world, now diminished, her dreams built on his sacrifice crumbling to dust. Outside, the rain had slowed to a drizzle, the air fresh with the scent of wet earth. Marcus joined him on the courthouse steps, his expression one of quiet triumph. "A clean win. How's it feel?" "Like breathing again," Ethan said, the word resilience settling deep in his bones, a foundation for the life he'd build next. Lightning cracked in the distance, closing a chapter of betrayal with a final resounding note. 6 months later, Ethan stood in a sleek office in Asheville's River Arts District, the sign above reading Marwood Logistics Solutions, its letters bold against the morning sun. Harper, now his operations chief, stood beside him, her buzz cut freshly trimmed, a proud grin on her face. "Beats our diner days, doesn't it?" she said, nudging him with her elbow. Inside, a small team, former warehouse workers like Nate and Tommy, hustled at modern desks, their laughter mingling with the hum of computers, contracts with regional suppliers lining the walls in neat frames. Ethan's phone pinged with a text from Caleb, now at a new university in Durham. Warwick's book deal's officially toast. Lila's license got denied. ethics violations. Ethan pocketed the phone, the news a distant echo of a battle already won. Lila and Warwick were fading shadows, their practice a ghost, their reputations ash in the wind. He thought of the early days after the divorce, the nights he'd spent alone in his duplex, the silence deafening after years of Lila's presence. He'd started running then, the trails of the Blue Ridge Mountains becoming his refuge, each step a declaration of resilience. His assistant, Mia, a bright-eyed 24-year-old with a knack for organization, called out, "You're 2 does here, Mr. Ashford." Theodore 76 strode in, his sharp eyes taking in the space with approval. Their partnership, sparked in the courthouse halls, had grown into a mentorship, Theodore's real estate firm providing the seed money for Ethan's startup. "Impressive setup," Theodore said, his voice warm. "Your call on this location was spot on, right in the heart of the arts district." "Couldn't have done it without your backing," Ethan replied, gratitude coloring his tone. They discussed contracts and expansion, but Theodore shifted gears, his tone turning personal. "Vivian saw Lila last week, applying for a clerical job at a rural clinic outside Hendersonville. Didn't get it. Her ethics are poison now." "That's her path," Ethan said, his voice neutral, though a flicker of pity stirred in his chest. "And Warwick's teaching intro psych at a community college in Wyoming, under an alias," Theodore added, a wry smile on his face, "though it's not hiding much." "I didn't want their ruin," Ethan said, his gaze drifting to the window, where the French Broad River glinted in the sunlight. "Just accountability." Theodore studied him, his expression one of quiet respect. "Most would have let revenge consume them. You stopped at justice and chose resilience instead." "4 years at the warehouse taught me balance," Ethan said, his voice steady, the memory of his father's steady hands guiding him still. "Obsession tips the load." Theodore paused at the door, his hand on the frame. "Vivian's hosting a scholarship gala next month at the Biltmore estate. She wants you there. Says your story of rebuilding inspires her." Ethan nodded, a warmth spreading in his chest. Mia called out, "Boss, the West Side shipment's off. Manifest error." "On my way," Ethan said, heading to the floor. His steps sure. The nights of sacrifice had forged him, but now he stood in daylight, building a legacy on his own terms. Lila's betrayal had called him lesser, but Ethan's resilience proved his true strength. A foundation unshakable, a future his own. In the weeks that followed, Marwood Logistics Solutions soared, its reputation growing as a reliable partner for small businesses across the Carolinas. But Asheville's tight-knit community carried whispers of Layla and Warwick's fall. Jobs lost, dreams shattered, their names a cautionary tale. Ethan stayed focused, mentoring his team, securing new clients, his days filled with purpose. One crisp evening, as the golden light of autumn spilled across the Blue Ridge Mountains, Ethan found himself at a quiet overlook near the river, the air rich with the scent of fallen leaves and the distant rush of water. He sat on a weathered bench, tracing the journey that had brought him here, from the depths of betrayal to the heights of rebuilding. A new voice broke his reverie. Nora Chen, a journalist from the Asheville Citizen-Times, who'd followed his story and now sought his perspective for a feature on resilience. They met at a riverside cafe, the kind with mismatched chairs and the best apple pie in town, her sharp questions softened by a genuine curiosity. "How do you rise after such a betrayal?" she asked, her pen poised over a notebook, her eyes warm with empathy. Ethan sipped his dark roast, the same blend he'd once made for Lila on those early mornings. The memory bittersweet but no longer sharp. "You don't rebuild to prove them wrong," he said, his voice steady, reflective. "You do it because you owe yourself a life that's truly yours." Nora's article, published a week later, painted Ethan not as a victim, but as a beacon of resilience, a man who'd turned loss into legacy. It drew attention, and soon community groups invited him to speak, their invitations a testament to the impact of his story. At one event, a high school senior named Mateo approached him, his eyes bright with determination. "My mom's been sick, and I'm working nights to help out," Mateo said, his voice trembling with hope. "Your story, it's like you're saying, I can still make it." Ethan clapped a hand on his shoulder, the gesture steady, grounding. "You can, Mateo, one step at a time." The boy's gratitude lingered, a mirror to Ethan's own resilience, a reminder that his pain had carved a path to inspire others. Vivian's gala loomed and Ethan attended, stepping into a world of Asheville's elite at the Biltmore estate, the chandeliers casting a warm glow over the crowd. Vivian greeted him warmly, her strength a reflection of his own. "You're proof that sacrifice can bloom into something extraordinary," she said, her voice sincere. As Ethan addressed the crowd, sharing how his darkest nights led to his brightest days, he felt not just free, but whole. The applause wasn't for revenge, but for a man who'd balanced the ledger with justice and walked forward, unburdened, into a future he'd built himself. A year after the gala, Ethan stood on the edge of a new chapter, one he hadn't anticipated but welcomed with open arms. Marwood Logistics Solutions had grown beyond Asheville, securing contracts as far as Charleston and Knoxville, its name synonymous with reliability and grit. But Ethan's life wasn't just about the business anymore. It was about the connections he'd forged along the way. One sunny afternoon, as spring painted the mountains in shades of green, Ethan hosted a barbecue at his new home, a modest, craftsman-style house he'd bought in North Asheville, its wraparound porch perfect for gatherings. The air was thick with the scent of grilled burgers and the laughter of friends. Harper, who'd become his right hand and a fierce friend. Marcus, who'd swapped his tie for a flannel shirt and brought his famous potato salad. Caleb, who'd driven up from Durham with a new girlfriend on his arm. And Nate and Tommy, their warehouse stories filling the air with nostalgia. Ethan's brother Sam was there too, his mechanic's hands now clean, his grin wide as he flipped burgers beside Ethan. "You've built something real here, bro," Sam said, his voice thick with pride. "Dad would have been proud." Ethan nodded, the memory of their father's workbench a quiet anchor, the tools now displayed in his home office as a reminder of where he'd come from. As the sun dipped below the mountains, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Ethan noticed Mateo, the high school senior from the community event. Now a freshman at UNC Asheville, arriving with a shy smile and a homemade pie from his mother. "I got in because of a scholarship from Vivian's gala," Mateo said, his eyes shining. "Your speech, it made me believe I could do this." Ethan pulled him into a quick hug, the gesture natural, heartfelt. "You're doing the hard work, Mateo. I'm just glad I could help." Later, as the stars began to peek through the twilight, Nora Chen arrived, her journalist's notebook swapped for a bottle of local cider, her presence a quiet nod to the story that had brought them together. "I'm working on a follow-up piece," she said, her voice warm. "Your story keeps inspiring people, Ethan." "Tree." They sat on the porch, the others' laughter a soft backdrop, and Ethan shared how the past year had taught him the true meaning of rebuilding, not just a business, but a life rooted in community, purpose, and the kind of resilience that could withstand any storm. As fireflies began to dance in the yard, Ethan looked out at the people who'd become his family, the mountains a silent witness to his journey. Lila's betrayal had once threatened to break him, but Ethan Marwood had turned that pain into a legacy, proving that justice and resilience could light the way to a future brighter than any past.